and welcome to this Women in Economics Network webinar on women's financial literacy. My name is Elizabeth Alvaro and I am a manager at Deloitte Access Economics, and it's my pleasure to facilitate tonight's event in my role as chair of the Women in Economics Network in South Australia. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Women in Economics Network, or WEN as we commonly call it, we were founded to promote and support the careers of female economists in Australia. The network is linked to the Economic Society of Australia, and we're pleased to be co-hosting this event with them today. Now, with the upside of online technology and Zoom, we're really excited to be reaching all corners of Australia and hopefully overseas as well with this event. We would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the lands wherever you may be tonight, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Before we formally begin, I would also like to thank everyone who made this event possible, including Janine and Sally from the National WEN Committee, as well as Diane, our admin support from the Economic Society. I'll shortly hand over to Cherelle Murphy, who will be moderating our panel for the next 40 minutes or so, but we will have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, hopefully on Zoom, you will see a button at the bottom of your computer screen or on your phone, which has a Q&A function. So as we go all throughout the panel, please pop any questions you might have in there, and you can also give a thumbs up or an upvote to those questions you'd most like us to cover at the end of the session. It's now my pleasure to introduce our panel, which includes Professor Alison Preston from the University of Western Australia, Dr. Tracey West from Griffith University, and Laura Higgins from ASIC. And our moderator, Cherelle Murphy from ANZ. Cherelle, take it away.
Thank you very much, Liz, and good evening, everyone. Now, for those of you who saw my tweet today, I have encouraged everyone to look the kids out if you have them around, get yourself a glass of wine, and let's enjoy ourselves. I think we're going to have a really great conversation this evening. So I thank you all for zooming in, and I also thank, of course, our panelists for their time. So before we take a deep dive into our topic, I thought it would be good to help us to get to know the panel a little bit more by asking each of them how they got into financial literacy, particularly women's financial literacy, and you know, what sparked your interest? Maybe we can start with you, Alison.
Well, thanks very much, Cherelle, and thanks again also to the WEN for organising this event. You know, Cherelle, I'd like to say that it was a strategic decision on my part in the way that women are strategic about their careers, but you know, as it was, like women in careers, it was just something I happened to fall into. I attended a conference in Scotland, and a colleague over there said to me, you know, Alison, why has Australia got the largest gender gap in financial literacy? And I said, I don't know, and I don't even know that I know what financial literacy is. And that started us doing some research, and I have to say it's fantastic to be doing that. And, you know, just point that I guess I'd like to make, because we're speaking to economists, is my background's labour economics, and what's really exciting as an academic coming to the study of financial literacy with a background in labour economics is that there's a lot of tools that we use in labour economics that we can bring to studies of financial literacy, because from our perspective, financial literacy is another skill. It's a human capital acquisition, and so it really lends itself. So that's how I got into it, and fantastic to be in it, and great to have a fantastic network of people working in this area as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison, and it's so good to hear another Scottish accent on the panel. Mine is a bit worn out now, mind you, but and Tracey, how did you end up here?
Thanks, Cherelle, and welcome everyone. I've had a long and windy road to academia. I first attempted a PhD in 2005 in finance, and that wasn't the right fit for me at the time. I returned to it 5 years later, and knowing that I was really interested in people and how they behave regarding their financial decisions, and by that time there were surveys available like the Hilda survey. Household finance was an emerging field, and I suddenly felt like there was a place for me, as opposed to traditional research areas like stock markets in the field of finance. So since completing the PhD and getting a foot in the door in academia, I teach behavioural finance, and it's a great job in the respect that I can pursue my own interests, and even part of the role is to have expertise in a topic. So financial literacy and financial decision making by people in general is what I'm interested in, and I work on all sorts of topics like the role of parents and conversations within the household, measuring financial literacy, financial well-being. I'm looking at consumer literacy, which is more of a numerical topic. And in all of my work, I cast a gender lens. And if I'm reviewing an article or examining a thesis, I encourage those researchers to do the same.
Thank you, Tracey. Very interesting. And Laura, how did you end up working at ASIC, and particularly in the role that you're in?
Thanks, Cherelle. Thanks for the question. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here in such lovely company. We've had a good time getting to know each other ahead of this event. I feel like we're old friends. So for me, I've been a long-time public servant. I started my career in education. I trained in Canada as a teacher, and I think I've always been driven by social justice, and it's strange, I suppose, to end up in ASIC as the financial service regulator, but it's great that I found my home in the financial capability work. So in ASIC, we're responsible for more of the demand side of what ASIC does. So that's a small bit of what ASIC does, but we lead the financial capability national strategy. We manage a financial wellbeing network, and we also deliver a number of programs, including the Money Smart website and the services underneath that, the Money Smart for Teachers program, the Indigenous Outreach program, and it's great work. It's the best job. I think that I was always driven and attracted to education because it was about people having choices and having the opportunity to succeed. And it's great to see that, to have that same investment around money, because I think that's what money's about. It's about not how much you have, but it's about having choices and understanding the choices around that. So it's great to be here tonight to talk about that, in particular, how that impacts women.
Great, thank you. So as we kind of move into this topic of financial literacy, I think we sort of, to some extent, we have to kind of define what we're talking about here. Now, I think one of the easiest ways to pick up on this is through the Hilda survey. You mentioned that before, Tracey. And what the Hilda survey, the last one, 2016, was telling us is that 1 in 2 adult women struggle with basic financial literacy concepts such as inflation, compound interest, and risk diversification. That compares to 1 in 3 adult men. So what are the consequences of that, Laura? Because that sounds like quite a bad comparison on a gender basis.
Well, it is really interesting to talk about financial literacy and what we know. And the Hilda survey, as Tracey mentioned, it's this great bit of data and fantastic to unpick and to trawl through to find those nuggets of, information that give us some insight. But one of the things that it does tell us is that it's not just about what people know, it's about how they feel about money. It's about the confidence. So a lot of those results reflect, those kind of negative results reflect a I don't know attitude towards money. And I think we see that playing out in all of the work that we do in this space, that yes, it's important to be able to understand, investment concepts and to understand, have the maths behind what you need to know about financial literacy, but actually to improve your financial well-being, to have the confidence to engage with your finances, to have the communication skills, the language around money is really important. And also to understand that everyone is making money decisions. Everyone. And I think that women sometimes don't acknowledge the significant money decisions they're making every day. So when you talk about investment and those kind of traditional financial concepts, I think lots of women, I don't know about money. There is a bit of a confidence and cultural response to that. But the reality is women are quite good with their money. So the Hilda data, they manage most likely women are managing the household finances, the day-to-day money decisions. They're planning around their family and caring for others. So they may not be focused on investing, which is some of the things that the Hilda data tells us. But we do know that they are very much making money decisions every day and thinking about how they can use their money to support their families and to care for others. And they're making good decisions, like women are less likely to have multiple super accounts. Women are less likely than men to be behind in some of their credit card payments. And also, they're more likely to talk to their family about money. So there's really great things that women are doing about money. And it's a great opportunity to shift the conversation a lot about confidence.
Interesting. So much more of an informal skill is already there, as opposed to that the Hilda's data is picking up a more kind of formal definition. Interesting. So Alison, let's move to some. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
I've recently looked at the I'm not sure responses. So the three concepts that you're talking about, compound interest, inflation, and diversification, we measure those with a set of questions. If the I don't know response is included as an option, women tend to select that option more often than men do. So it is about confidence. And we know with girls, with the PISA results of Year 10 students, that financial literacy, there's no gender differences in Year 10 students in financial literacy in Australia. It does seem to widen with these measurements that we use as people grow older. So what is it about women that happens to them where they lose this confidence is such an important issue that we need to understand what works to help them develop that confidence. And we also know that men display overconfidence traits as well. So it is a bit of a balancing up there. And just on gender as well, so the gender wage gap, there's a lot to be said for the ability to practice. And if you're earning relatively higher incomes, you have the ability to make financial decisions and wear some mistakes without really adverse consequences. And if there is a gender wage gap, casualisation of female work, lower paid work, they might not just have those opportunities to practice making financial decisions.
So I guess, as with all sort of results in economics, the fact that there is many reasons why we get to the point that we're at, I presume, and I guess that's what you're both alluding to. There's other things going on there. Alison, I just wanted to move to you and talk about some of your research. I'm particularly interested in your work on women's financial literacy and economic well-being. Now, it seems pretty bleeding obvious that there's a link there, but can you perhaps explain that to us in a more precise academic way?
Yeah, sure. And Cherelle, just before I go back onto some of the points that Laura was making there as well, I'm also using the Hilda data in my studies, and the questions that you've just talked there about in terms of how financial literacy is measured. And I appreciate where ASIC's coming from, where it is less on this specific narrow focus on financial literacy and looking at financial capability. And I often think of my mother, who might not have correctly answered all the questions in the financial literacy test, but she certainly knew how to manage a family budget and 4 of us on the allowance that she had. So there is a distinction there between that whole financial literacy and financial capability. But anyway, coming back to the question you've just asked, in terms of the research. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now is looking at superannuation. And of course, it's super topical at the moment, given all the drawdown options, etc. And our question is really, there's a large gender gap, as we know, in superannuation. This started actually because I wanted to put in a submission to the Treasury review that's going on right now. And so there's about a 60% gap in superannuation balances of males and females. And we know many reasons why. Obviously there's a gender pay issue there, there's a time in the labour market, etc. But when you control for all of that stuff, we wanted to see how much of the gender gap can be explained by gender differences in financial literacy. And the answer is that it's around 8 percentage points, which is a sizable share. And so, coming back to just even if I just look at superannuation as an area, there is a strong and significant causation between financial literacy and superannuation accumulation. Another way I can explain this is if you take the 5 measures in Hilda, and it's kind of like a test, so there's sort of 5 test questions there, and people can score between 0 and 5. For each additional question that a female answers correctly, their superannuation balance is predicted to rise by $6,000. So these are not insignificant numbers. And so absolutely, financial literacy will cut across a whole range of areas in terms of economic well-being and including empowerment as well. I'm sure others will have comments to make in that regard. But yeah, it's an important matter for sure.
Thanks. That's an incredible amount, isn't it? For picking up education there. When I was advertising this event on Twitter, someone came back to me and asked about the policymakers' understanding of financial literacy, and whether I'm sort of wondering, I guess, do we think that policymakers do have a good appreciation of the fact that there are some gender differences here? Laura, you're probably closest to this one. What do you think?
I think that's a great question. And I think for effective policy settings and program development and delivery across all areas, we aren't very practiced at what Tracey was talking about applying that gender lens. So when we rolled out the responses for COVID-19 as a government, when the government announced the measures there, with regards to superannuation, that's a quick response. How are we delivering that? How are we helping people right now? Great that people can access help when they need that. But actually, there was no time to apply that gender lens and see how that might play out differently for women, for instance. So one is, are we practiced at using a gender lens in developing policy? I think we know it's important, and I think we're trying to get better. Some of it is lack of data. Some of it is policy on the run, and some of it is, just us not speaking together across giant, coordinating our responses in the right way. So I think it is great in this time right now when everyone is thinking about their well-being, but also everyone is thinking about their financial well-being, to also consider how this is impacting women, how this is impacting policy settings now, programs now, and how it will in the future. I think this is a really interesting opportunity for us to reset some of our thinking there and to really consider, and I think that's what people are doing across the world. That is what people are doing. My colleagues in Canada and the US and the UK and the Netherlands were having these same conversations. And I think that coming out the other side of this and in recovery, women will continue to be a great focus. So I'm hopeful that policymakers will have a better understanding of how policies impact women, but also because of the focus on financial well-being, also think about how these things are connected. Because when we're doing things like measuring the impact of the work that we do, measuring financial well-being is very complicated. I mean, it's not just about knowledge and capability. It's about adequacy. It's about other social factors. Are people suffering from financial abuse? Have people gone through a divorce and are suffering more perhaps than a man might? It's so complicated. But I think that it's easier and easier for people to understand that financial well-being is an important part of their well-being in general. So perhaps people are more likely to reach out for help, to ask questions, to get advice, to get online and educate themselves and build their confidence. I think it is a real opportunity to make sure we're better at that.
Yeah. And Tracey, from your point of view, what do you think the policymakers are getting right here and what are they getting wrong?
Well, I think Laura and her Money Smart team have done a fabulous job getting the independent source of financial information right on their website, easily accessible. That resource is so important, as well as the resources for teachers. And they're very active. So the regular seminars, the research network, the developments in the last couple of years have been absolutely outstanding. But I do think that there are a lot of areas where policymakers need to do better. If you turned your mind to gambling and consumer credit problems, you could be forgiven for thinking that policymakers' attention is elsewhere. And the Royal Commission into Financial Services showed some abhorrent behaviour. So there have been some regulatory changes, like ASIC can now have the product intervention power, which I'm hoping they will use effectively. So we get to see the results of that. So I think the sector in itself the provision of products and how information is given to consumers, the choice architecture, we saw that, what information consumers have to make decisions at an informational level that they can digest is really important. The difficulty in finding information, they need to make a decision, terms and conditions in contracts, all of that stuff really needs to be highlighted and addressed, not just for women, but for everybody. And I think if we do focus on helping our low socioeconomic communities, then we do help everyone. More resources into financial counsellors, our legal aid officers do a great service in terms of financial literacy as well. Community development organisations deliver essential services. So we really do need to boost those face-to-face opportunities in our communities to exchange information. I've often thought that Money Smart should have a little office in shopping centres, much like the Justice of the Peace services. Sorry, Laura, to add that to your list of things to do, but we just need this independent source of advice that we can go to face to ask information sometimes.
What a great idea, Tracey. Almost like a little Medicare office or something with a financial advice. Very good idea. Very
Campuses,
good.
Of course, universities can do more. We can add developing financially capable graduates to our graduate attributes. We can provide services to our students to help them engage with this financial information as well. Universities need to do more.
We'll help you do that, Tracey.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Fantastic. Some good ideas coming out there. One thing I noticed with a very quick look at Australian media was that the words women and financial literacy appeared more than double the number of times between the February and April period in 2018 and 2019 compared to any year previously. So it looked like it was really, a topic getting ahead of steam, being talked about more in the popular press and right throughout the media, in fact. Now that dropped away this year. Now, there's probably a very obvious reason for that. But Alison, I just wanted to ask you about your views on this, because are we at this stage now where women's financial literacy as a topic which we're all sort of much more aware of, we're thinking about more, the general press is thinking about, is that something that's going to go away? Or do you think actually the fact that women have had actually a pretty rough time through the COVID crisis, because a lot of the jobs that have been lost have been in those feminized industries, is this something that will actually bring attention to the issue of women and financial literacy, or will it take it away?
I have to say, Cherelle, as my other panel members have said already, your questions are absolutely fantastic. So congratulations for putting them together. And I also read the piece that you prepared on financial literacy, and I noticed this word search that you've done, which I have to say I wasn't aware of until I'd read it, that it had been so prominent and I had fallen away. Will we see more of it? I sincerely hope so. And I think events like this will certainly contribute to that. I'm sure the work that ASIC's doing, I think there is a momentum happening. Maybe because I'm quite new to the field, but I certainly feel as if there's a lot going on. I know that there's organisations, Financial Toolbox, I've got debates coming up. Tracey might want to talk about that because she's on one of the debates that's going to be there. I participated in a forum earlier this year in Perth, organised by Finimize, talking about women in financial literacy, financial matters as well. And you're right. I mean, this recession is just, it's a shocker in so many ways. It's obviously, we know it's unprecedented. We've never seen it before, but all other recessions in the past are basically men have been harder hit than women. And that's partly because women's participation rates weren't as high as they are now, but it's also partly because of the change that we've had in the economy towards the service sector, and it's the services sector. Well, all sectors have been hit, but the service sector is the one that's got the more casuals in it. The university sector's got the casuals, and the casuals are the ones that are not getting the same coverage. And so, of course, now money becomes a big issue for all of us, but it's women that have been harder hit than men. And I go back to the points I think that Laura was making at the beginning. It really now focuses our attention on money. And maybe a good thing that's going to come out of this as well is again led by organisations such as WEN, is that we will start to see more conversations about money. And it won't just be behind the door conversations, it will be out there. So I don't know the answer to your question, Cherelle, but I hope for sure that we will see more and not less of it. And I think we will. I'd be confident. You know, look, you hear the Scottish accent. We're traditionally pessimists. But on this one, I'm going to be an optimist.
Good, that's great. Yeah, and I'm certainly turning into a bit of a bully with my friends and making them talk about it as we sit around, you know, having dinner with a glass of wine, something that, to be honest, we didn't used to do in our 20s. Mm-hmm. And something that I think that we need to do more of. Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't shy away from it. When you mentioned the piece that I wrote on financial literacy, which has been really interesting, actually, because it's not my usual thing. I you know, mainly talk about fiscal policy. So when I wrote that piece, I got some feedback from Erica Johnson, who is the head of marketing for Six Park, and she noted that women are often taught to save, but not necessarily to invest. I found that to be a very interesting point. Laura, according to ASIC's survey, again, picked this up in the article, which was on Australian financial attitudes and behaviour, it showed that women found it dealing with money much more stressful and overwhelming than men did. So sort of coming back to how we started, do you think that that's an education problem or is it a cultural problem?
Well, again, I think it's a bit of both. You know, I think it is a very complex thing to consider. When you talked about what you were looking at with regards to, say, your Google search, you know, what are women looking for? Are they looking women's financial literacy? Is that a thing? Well, I would always say to people about that I know the national strategy is doing its job when it's embedded in what people do and people don't even know the strategy exists anymore. So it's a little bit like, is financial literacy a thing, or it's just stuff that we do? You know, it isn't a foreign concept that people need to look up anymore. It's what people do. For the Money Smart website, we had 10 million Australians visited it last year, and at least half of them were women. So if we know that half the women are using Money Smart, what does that tell us about how women are thinking about money? So I think it is both cultural, as in, let's change the conversation. Women are great at money. And like you said, Cherelle, about you talking with your friends about this and raising it at dinner parties, I do the same. I'm terrible. And I'm often telling and embarrassing my children and telling people in the supermarket, you know, women, hey, that's a great money choice, because they're talking to their kids about what's in season or maybe what's not on the list. And they're not thinking about it as money choices. It's just life. It's just the stuff they do. So reminding people that actually, they're making money choices all the time in the transport that they choose, in the travel arrangements that they make, in the food that they buy, and they're making they're making informed decisions. So because they are looking at places like Money Smart. So look, I think that you're right. Women lack the confidence, as Tracey's point as well, and Alison's research, I'm sure, was backing that up. They don't necessarily have the confidence around investing, but I think we need to stop that. I think we need to stop them thinking about it in that way and change the dialogue. Catherine Attard, who is an associate professor at the university, at Western Sydney University, I met her a few years ago when we were talking about the Money Smart teaching program. And she said something that stuck with me, which was, we're okay with kids saying, oh, I'm not good at maths. That's okay, or I don't do maths. But we don't let people say, I'm not good at reading, or I don't do reading. So why is that? Why is that okay to say, oh, I don't do maths. Maths isn't my thing. We have to do the same thing about money. So let's just stop doing that. You know, actually, it's unacceptable to be saying, I'm not engaging with my money and, I'm not good at that, and really changing the dialogue. I think that's really important.
And perhaps, Laura, going back to some of the points you're making there, this starts right at the, that primary school age group, the sort of choices that you make at a supermarket. I've been trying to get my kids to pay attention to petrol prices and, not taking it for granted that you just necessarily drive to the closest one, although often I'm running late, my petrol's low, and that's what I end up doing, but nevertheless.
But financial capability isn't just about maths, right? It's about problem solving, and it's about making choices, and understanding a scam is, yes, about understanding that perhaps that's too good to be true, but it's also about thinking about how you're going to make a decision and who you're going to talk to about that decision. So if that's a big part of money decision, then women are already doing that, because they're, the women that I know, great problem solvers, and it's not about how much money they earn. So I think it is just about engaging with your money, understanding that Australian women, if you have a super account, you're already investing. You are an investor. So engaging with your money and owning those decisions that are being made about your money, and putting the same amount of time and care into how you might select and choose advice as you would about if you have the opportunity to have someone come and clean your house. You spend all this time researching, talking to your friends, who's good, how do you do this? Do you spend the same amount of time thinking about how people are looking after your superannuation? So it's just about committing to looking after, engaging in your own money, and really understanding to own those decisions.
Cherelle?
Yeah, go ahead, Tracey.
So these things, attitudes to money and knowledge, starts at a young age. It does start at primary school age. I think there are studies that show habit formation starts at around age 3. And role modeling of the parents in the home is really important. So that's the language about money, and this "I don't do maths" mantra that many women say. I've heard females say it on the radio. I've heard very senior females that manage departmental budgets say it in forums, that they don't do numbers and they don't have a confidence with it. It happens very early in the home. It can happen with pocket money even. So all of us can do something and stop this intergenerational transmission of a lack of confidence, with being really conscious of how we speak to our children about money, particularly daughters, how we include them in money conversations in the home. Pocket money. So studies find that boys get paid more pocket money than girls. Girls are expected to do more chores within the house for free, like stacking the dishwasher, clearing things away. They're always inside the home type of chores, and boys get allocated the lawn mowing and the outside of the home type of chores. So these gender stereotypes start very early, and we inadvertently perpetuate the linking of monetary rewards with these types of duties, or expectations that we do more work. Girls do more work for free. So it's really important that we start to talk to young people, or parents. We start to talk to parents and educate parents about this, as well as I think it would be really important to talk about high school age children, about money and relationships and unexpected events like divorce or domestic violence or health issues or job loss, so that they can digest the information and give some thought to it before they're in those situations themselves.
Sure, I just wonder if I could just jump in there, only because I found myself laughing at the comment that Tracey made there about pocket money, and she's absolutely right. I know that's what the research generally shows, but just as an anecdote, recently my parents have now passed, and recently I was rummaging through something and I found an old diary. My dad used to make us sign for our pocket money so that we couldn't go back and say I haven't had it. We had to sign, and I found this, and I've got a brother who's a few years younger. And when I found it, when you got a birthday, you got a pay rise. A pocket money rise. And I found this, and I could see what he got and what I got. And the first thing I did was calculate it to make sure that we got the same, that there was no gender bias there. So I can pleased to say that my father didn't exercise that one. But again, the point is he talked about money. He was open about money. We had the books. We signed for it. There was days before spreadsheets. But I think all those kind of tools, as I think the point that Tracey's making as well. It's just being open, being frank. I've worked with my kids as well, and they couldn't save, and you say, well, keep a spreadsheet, log what you spend all your money on. Lo and behold, it's Hungry Jack's because it's the nearest place to our house. So it's all just part of the coaching for them.
This reminds me of a wonderful ad about 3 years ago that ANZ launched, which basically showed a little boy and a little girl being paid different amounts. And the look on both kids' faces was like, what are you doing? Like, how is that fair? And, it resonates, of course, with all of us. So now there's a new book on the market. Now, we have nothing to do with this book. I'm not endorsing it or anything, but see there, it's called The Joy of Money. It's got a sunglass-clad, oh dear, not showing up very well, is it? Back here. Sunglass-clad woman, looking very cool. It's by Gillian Newbold and Kate McCallum. It's a nice read. There's lots of good tips in there. And it sort of begs the question, given the title, The Joy of Money, how do we make managing money and investing money, for the sake of a good future, sexy for women? Laura, what do you think? Any good ideas?
Oh, look, I'm thinking about this all the time, Cherelle, right? So
you are.
I think it's about women. I think it's about bringing it back to choices. That it isn't about making money sexy necessarily. It's about thinking about choices that you want to have, and it's about being empowered. I think that like I said, that boring mum that talks about money all the time to my kids, to strangers, to their friends, and so it's so embarrassing. But I just think the more we talk about it with each other, I talk to my friends. I called all of my closest female friends and talked to them about, hey, when's the last time you asked for a pay rise? Tell me about that. How did that go? And none of the women that I'd asked had ever asked for a pay rise. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, I rang some of my male friends. They gave me some great advice. But, that kind of thing is just crazy ridiculous. And we really need to get together to support each other. We spend a lot of time, at book clubs. I hope people are reading books about money. There's great podcasts now. There's so many fantastic resources for people to get together and discuss and share, that it is a real opportunity. When you've renegotiated your mortgage and you get a great deal, call all your friends, tell them about it. I'm very likely to call someone and say, I know you were looking at that great suit and it's on sale somewhere. Would I have the same conversation about the great deal I got in my insurance or on my mortgage? And I think it is about making it important, understanding it's about choices. And women right now are often interested in, how do I look after my family and how do I give my children choices? And if they look after themselves right now, their kids will have more choices in their future. So if you're not looking after your money and your superannuation and, whatever your retirement plans are, if you're looking after that well, your kids will have more choice. You'll be less of a burden. You will, it is looking after yourself right now. Things like working part-time, women often fall into that trap where they say, I'm going to work less hours to give myself more flexibility. They're not actually working less hours. They're getting paid for less hours. And that means their employer is putting less money into their super. So actually, this is a great time for people to think, hey, I'm working flexibly. I'm not working 5 hours, each day. That's all looking quite different. And maybe they are doing a full-time load. Therefore, they should be earning full-time wages and getting more super. So really thinking about investing in yourself and money right now makes a difference to you now, but it also makes a huge difference to choices you have in the future and choices your family will have. So I think that's sexy, having choices.
Couldn't agree more. Tracey, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good topic to think about. In behavioural insights work, we find making things social is a really good design technique to attract people to do something. So I actually follow this Facebook group called Mums Who Budget and Save. And these mums, Laura, they do what you say. They celebrate the savings they made at the grocery store. They celebrate paying down their debt. And that's why I love following the group, because they are really social, collaborative, supportive of each other.
You'll have to hook me up, Tracey. I love that.
Yeah. A lot of them also really talk a lot about the Barefoot Investor. And I'm not here to promote him either. But having read some of his books, he does have some ingenious ideas, like getting your teenagers to ring around to find a better deal on your bills. So I think he has some great techniques to help people manage their money in different ways. Back in my day, it was Paul Clitheroe. When I was a young adult, Paul Clitheroe had some books out, and I had a Women in Money book that was my Bible 20 years ago. So books keep coming on the market, and I hope people grab onto them and take something from them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been trying, in preparation for this seminar, reading some of these books. And I did think actually a lot of them were really talking to men. I mean, look at Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for example. I mean, it's in the title, right? What about Rich Mum, Poor Mum? Anyway, look, I'm just conscious of leaving some time for the audience. So I'm just going to finish up my questions to you by asking each of you to give us one try this at home question. So give us one piece of advice where we can improve our investment behaviour. Tracey, I'll start with you again.
Okay, so we know that women are risk averse in many contexts. So I think perhaps take a little bit more risk would be an investment, bit of investment advice. More than that, I wanted to say be careful with the words you use, especially around our daughters, and stop saying I don't do numbers, or I don't know how to do that. Just don't say it. So yeah, that's to leave you with.
Great. And Alison? Oh, we've lost you, Alison. You're on mute.
It would help, wouldn't it? I was going to say, I think Tracey had about 4 there, so maybe I don't have to contribute. My area has just been so focused right now on superannuation, and it's just such a big happening at the moment that perhaps I'm echoing what Laura might say, but my advice would just be, it is a minimum, engage with your superannuation. And I think the skills that you'll get out of doing that will both stand you in good stead for a whole bunch of other areas of the finance world. And work with the Money Smart website, because it will really help you on your way. And I've not been paid by Laura to say this.
Thanks. And Laura, what's your try this at home tip for us?
Oh, well, we should start with Money Smart. Starting with Money Smart, it's a great place to start. But look, I think you talk about women investing. If you've got super, you are an investor. So recognize, I think Alison's point is a really great one. Know your super. Just get to understand your super investment. Maybe you want to reach out to get some, for more formal advice and guidance from your super fund right now. You want to understand what's happening in the market, how it might have changed in COVID. It's a really safe place for women, for anyone to understand investment, how it works. But someone else right now, if you've got superannuation, is looking after your money. Right. So I'm going to say, if you want to have, consider investments and growing your investments or establishing a portfolio, that might be great for your individual circumstances. I'm not giving advice on, that's not my thing. But I can tell you to get to know your super, and you will feel better having that sorted and having an understanding of that. If you haven't, understanding how your insurance works in super, understanding if you're in the right fund, understanding what investments are being made on your behalf. Are they ethical investments? You're okay with that? Do you understand that? But it's a real great opportunity for everyone, and a great opportunity to have with young people at a working age. You get your first job, you have to fill out a form that, what is my super? To have that conversation of what does that mean? How does it work? So just starting with getting to know your super is great. And then, as Tracey was saying, understand risk. What is your appetite for risk? Right now, people probably aren't feeling, some people are really not feeling like engaging with risk, whereas others are seeing opportunities. So I think understanding your risk appetite is really important, and having those conversations out loud with your family, out loud with your friends, and calling up the women that you know and saying, hey, what's worked for you and what hasn't? Sharing your mistakes, but sharing your wins as well.
That's a good one.
Cherelle, can I just come back in and just echo a point again that Laura's just made there? I think for me, I've got 3 young well, not so young anymore, but they're aged between 23 and 27 boys. And it's been working with them through their superannuation. That's been a really nice vehicle for me to just sit down with them and explain, and one of them had accounts everywhere and was paying for life insurance that he didn't need in 3 different ones. And another one had all these funds wiped out by fees because, by the time I got round to sitting down with them, they had gone. And we had good conversations about whether or not they would withdraw their money right now. And they have. And I understand why they've done it, but we had a good chance to have a solid conversation about why they would do it. So, not only is it good for oneself to engage with the super, but it is a nice vehicle through which you can sit down and have a solid conversation with your children as well. And again, the Money Smart website has just got so many resources to help that conversation as well. But I'm now starting to sound like that advert again, so I'll stop.
Don't stop, Alison. It's okay.
Oh, look, I agree. And I think the superannuation is a very interesting one. It's so empowering when you log on and you see your balance and you see it grow, and you think, that's my money, that's my, and not only is it my money, but I'm going to be able to access it when the kids are growing up. They're not relying on me anymore. Every now and again, I get really frustrated with my kids. I just go and log on and look at my super account and go, okay, one day it'll all be over. I'll get to access it. Now I'm going to hand over to Liz, who's been monitoring the Q&A. I can see there's lots of questions in there, and she's going to take us through some of the questions. So thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Cherelle. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to go through all of these great questions. So for people still listening at home, please use those little thumbs up because it'll help us figure out what we tackle first. So I'm going to start with Theresa's question. She's curious if there is a link between financial literacy and some household level characteristics. For example, the presence of a partner, women's relative income to partner, household income decile. Some older UK research suggests that in partner households, women are more likely to have budget responsibility when there is little discretionary income, but men are more likely to have responsibility in circumstances where there are financial decisions to be made.
I don't know if you just want us to jump in. I'm sure Tracey will have quite a bit to say on this as well. But the research that I'm certainly aware of would agree with all the points that Tracey has made there. Often you'll see in couple households that there's one person takes on the role as being the chief financial officer, if you like, and typically that's the guy. And it also varies by education. So, if you're in a household where the woman's the more educated, then she might actually take on that role. But typically it's the guy that takes on that role. And unfortunately for women, one of the effects is that they engage with the superannuation, all the decisions around those kind of investments, and the woman doesn't. And that's where we start to see one of the reasons that contributes to there being a gender gap in financial literacy, because the more you do, the more you learn. And if you're not doing, you're not learning. So it is an issue. But I'm sure my other panelists will have something else to add to that.
Yeah, I know of literature on those lines as well. But we do know there is something about a couple household that is more than just the sum of the income and division of bills and things, like an economy of scale there. There's something more about a couple household where it seems like they are setting goals, they are dividing labour, they are achieving those goals in some way that singles don't do. So there is something there, and I think it is that social aspect. It's having someone to bounce ideas off. It's having different skills that each of the people bring to the table. But certainly it is usually the male that makes the big financial decisions and responsible for those investment decisions, and the female that usually takes the household budgetary position.
I think that Alison and Tracey will be far more across, the current research, but certainly from an ASIC perspective, we're doing some research at the moment to unpack that a bit more, in COVID. What does that mean? If everyone's home, I reckon roles are playing out a bit differently. So we just want to understand in this environment, maybe what we can learn from that. It is a real opportunity to have more visibility of things, like what are your kids doing at school, or I understand much more now about what my husband does at work. It's I have some questions for him at the end of each day. But I'm thinking it's a very interesting time. So to see how that plays out in couples and decision making, I think it won't necessarily. We might learn something new, I think, right now, because those traditional roles, I suspect the women that are dialed in tonight, they might not fall into those same traditional roles. And if they do have some questions or don't know where some of the household money is, I hope they go ask the right questions at the end of this.
I think on a related COVID note, it's something that we haven't discussed too much tonight, but obviously still very relevant. Astrid is wondering if there's any early data regarding the gender makeup of those taking early super. What are their spending decisions with this money, and also what are the consequences for women of this early withdrawal? Tracey or Alison? Alison will come to you.
I'm happy to go, but I was assuming Laura might actually jumped in first there as well. I was actually just looking at some of the ATO data on this just the other day there, and the available data that I'm able to access, Laura, you might have more recent statistics, suggests that, well, we know that the young people are overrepresented in the drawdowns, so age between 25 to 35, and 57% of the drawdowns have been made by males, so proportionately more males than females are making the drawdowns. I didn't see any statistics about whether or not there was a gender difference in the amount that's been drawn down. But for any group that's taking that money out, on one level, as economists, we could assume that they've made a rational decision and they're going to be putting this money off into some investment that's perhaps got better outcomes for them than what they thought it was going to be in the long term. But we obviously also know that it seriously means that the superannuation is going to have less at the end of the day. And the big concern that I think I've got in all of this is that there's particular funds that are taking a hit more than others. So the funds in the hospitality sector are clearly taking a hit because that's where a lot of the people are lost their jobs and are in financial difficulty making the drawdowns. And it also means that for the people who are left in that fund, that there's going to be consequences for them as well. So it's not just that we're concerned about those who are taking money out, but I feel concerned for the funds where they've lost a lot of money, where people are going to be left. And I think there's a gendered side to that that's not really being discussed. And I saw Laura nodding her head there, so I'm going to mute myself because I want to hear what Laura has to say as well.
Well, I don't have much to add to that, Alison, other than to say it is in some ways surprising. I wasn't sure how the stats would fall out, whether it would be more women accessing their super than men, and it hasn't played out the way I initially had expected. But I think you're right, Alison, in talking about long term what this means. If there are more women in funds that have struggled, there'll be significant consequences for them in retirement, or not significant, but consequences. So this is a time for people to engage with their funds and to understand that. One of the great things is that millions of Australians now are engaged in their super, right? So it is a really great time for people to pay attention and understand what their superannuation is. People are looking at money decisions differently. My daughter, for the first time, is talking about uni and whether or not her uni courses are worth the money. I mean, our previous research would suggest that price does not matter or come into it because of the way student loans work. But at the moment, young people are asking themselves money questions that they haven't before. What's this point of super? How does this work? How do I engage with this? Why is this important? Is this course worth it? Do I want to be paying this off, even though it's an income contingent loan? So I think that this is a big question for us to manage in the decades to come, Alison. You will not run out of work.
All right, I reckon we have time for one more question, and it's a very practical one. Laura, this one was for you, but I'm sure our whole panel can contribute. What practical tips can you share when asking for a pay rise?
So I did ask, I quizzed my friends, do some research beforehand. So first I'm going to say, do some research, actually practice right? Understand what you're worth. Understand what people in similar jobs are making. So you need to talk about money. And some people are really uncomfortable with that. People don't want to tell you, this is how much I make. But if you're willing to share, hey, this is how much I make, what do you think about that? Or if I was going to ask for an amount, what would you suggest? They might be willing to come to the party to that conversation. So you do have to be prepared to say no, to get a no, to hear no. But practicing is important. And when I went in and spoke to my boss at the time about a pay rise, I said, look, I'm uncomfortable having this conversation. I don't know, maybe you're uncomfortable. What, we're going to give it a go together, let's see where we get to in this. And I had quite a good relationship with that boss. So I thought, if I can't practice with this person, I'm not going to be prepared for future conversations. So I think you need to back yourself when you're thinking about your worth, back yourself when you're thinking about how many hours you do. Know that it's okay that if you take Fridays off at 3:00 to pick up the kids, that doesn't make you part-time. That just makes you unavailable at 3:00 on a Friday, right? So
when everyone else is going to the pub anyway.
Exactly. So I think talk to your friends and, help each other. There's lots of great resources out there. There's great videos to watch. There'd be great information in the book that you talked about, Cherelle, I'm sure. So, the successful women that we know are backing themselves, and maybe not all of them are asking to be paid what they're worth, but, have those conversations, I think.
I think I can just add to that as well. And the literature definitely shows that women, in terms of promotions, tend not to want to apply for promotion until they feel that they're ready for a promotion, whereas the guys will go for a promotion ahead of time. And again, I'm just an anecdote, but I was aware of this literature. And so many years ago, I thought, I'll apply for promotion to professor, and I had a few colleagues. There was an information session that I turned up to, and they said, "What are you doing here?" And I've just come to find out about how the process is to apply for promotion. And I figured if I didn't get up, I would at least know where the goalposts were, because I kind of thought I was probably a bit early going as well. Well, as it turned out, I got up, and I think the lesson for me in that one was it's just as I said, that guys will go perhaps. Just put themselves up earlier than when a woman would. And so it comes back to Laura's point, back yourself and be prepared for the no's. But I think also you're signaling that, I want a pay rise. If it doesn't come now, that you can knock back on the door in 6 months or a year's time, say, look, that pay rise I didn't get, well, now's the time, and you just start pushing those goalposts along a bit. Well.
That comeback's really important, Alison. That is great advice. Say, I appreciate your consideration now. I'm going to come back to you in 6 months and have this conversation again. That comeback, good advice.
And for when there is a whole literature on this, right? Gender discrimination in employment. So just take the risk, I think.
I think that's a good note to perhaps end on, to take the risk. Alison, Tracey and Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights tonight, and of course to Cherelle for moderating such a great discussion. We have popped a small gift in the mail for you, hopefully. A Wen Keep Cup. Hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it and use it at a nearby cafe quite soon. The Women in Economics Network and the Economic Society both have a really full calendar of online events, all of which are free for members, and many of them, including this one, are free or low cost for the general public as well. So you can go to esacentral.org.au and there's a full list of upcoming events and you can register on there. And I suppose it's important to note that part of our role is to open up these conversations to both economists and non-economists. And we welcome certainly anyone who's interested to join our events, and you definitely don't need to have an economics degree. So many of our conversations, as such as this one, are certainly designed to engage and inform a much broader audience. If you are on social media, you can also join our WEN Facebook group. We also have a Twitter and LinkedIn where you'll find news articles, research, job opportunities, and of course our upcoming events. And just lastly, we thank you for supporting WEN, and we do hope that in these more difficult times you're able to continue your membership or join up to support us. This enables us to keep bringing these sorts of activities to you and advocating for a high representation of women in economics in Australia. Thank you for joining us tonight. Please stay healthy and stay safe.